Madam, mute touch mute.
Equilibrium price is defined as the price at which the quantity demanded and quantity supplied are equal. Quantity demanded is an inverse function of price, while quantity supplied is a direct function of price. The two functions can be intersected, and that can be illustrated with a diagram. In the diagram, the downward sloping demand curve intersects the upward sloping demand curve at point E, which was known as the Marcelinian cross. If in the equilibrium, OQ1 the quantity is sold and purchased at OP1 price. If the market price is more than the equilibrium price, the result is excess supply will push the price downwards to the OP2, and we read all the demand curves negative slope throughout their entire range, and all supply curves have positive slope throughout their entire range. Prices change if and only if there is excess demand or excess supply. Prices rise if there is excess demand and fall if there is excess supply. And market price has a tendency to be equal to the equilibrium price. This is called stable equilibrium. When the price is not in stable equilibrium, this is called unstable equilibrium. In un, it can be described through a diagram. Here there is if there is situation of unstable equilibrium, then what happens? We have plotted negative slope demand curve and a negative slope supply curve. Equilibrium is determined at point E if the market price will fall to OP1. Quantity supplied is more than the quantity demanded, and therefore the market price will fall further. Similarly, if market price were to be OP3, quantity supplied is less than quantity demanded, and hence the price should still rise further. Thus, in this situation, there is unstable equilibrium. The condition for stable equilibrium is that above the equilibrium point, surplus must exist, and below the equilibrium point, shortage must exist. In case this condition is not fulfilled, we get unstable equilibrium. Then, effects of shift in demand and supply curve on equilibrium. If a shift in demand curve will affect the equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity, it can be described in the diagram, page number 71. An increase in demand curve would result in an increase in the equilibrium price and increase in the equilibrium quantity. A decrease in demand would result in a decrease in the equilibrium price, a decrease in equilibrium quantity. Then shift in supply curve. A shift in supply curve will also affect both the equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. An increase in supply would result in a fall in the equilibrium price and increase in the equilibrium quantity. A decrease in supply would result a rise in the equilibrium price, a fall in the equilibrium quantity. Simultaneously, we may also examine if both demand and supply curves shift simultaneously. The combined result it would be determined as like an increase in demand raises A and increase in raises P and increase in Q. A decrease in demand lowers P and decreases Q. An increase in supply lowers P and increases Q. If both demand and supply curve increase or shift rightward, the quantity increases but the price may rise or remain the same. If the demand decreases, shifts leftward, and the supply increases, shifts rightward, the price falls, but the quantity may increase, decrease, or not change. So, equilibrium point is also changes due to change the supply and demand curve. Then applications of demand. The rationing and the allocation of scarce goods. Rationing means fixation of price control. Price control means that a ceiling has been imposed on the prices of such commodities as are covered under the price control measures. Fixation of ceiling on prices means that the free operation of the forces of demand and supply is not being permitted. Ceiling price more than the equilibrium price will have no effect on the market, and if ceiling price equals the equilibrium price, it will leave the market unaffected. If ceiling price is less than the equilibrium price, it will create conditions which not not need our further attention. So that the ceiling price or price controls can create three situations: shortage, problem of election and limited scarce, and black marketing. The, the quantity actually sold and bought in the market will shrink. As a result, a large chunk of consumers' demand will go unsatisfied. This situation as it arises. And problem as already observed, shortage of commodity means that all those consumers who demand the commodity at the ruling price cannot be satisfied. In other words, a large number of potential consumers of the commodity will be denied its use. And then black marketing. It is a direct consequence of price controls. Black marketing implies a situation in which the controlled commodity is sold unlawfully below the desk at a price higher than the lawfully enforced selling price. This situation arises largely because of the number of potential consumers of the commodity is more than what can be served by the available supply of the commodity. And there are consumers who are willing to pay more than the selling price. Then black marketing is in a commodity which price has been controlled by the authorities will invariably arise since there are consumers who are willing to pay more than the controlled price. Then price support measures. Price support means a floor has been fixed on the price of such commodities as are covered under the price support measures. Producers of these commodities need not sell at prices lower than the floor price or minimum prices fixed by the government. Fixation of floor on prices means that the free operation of the forces of demand and supply is being interfered. And nor if floor price is less than the equilibrium, it will have no effect on the market, and the consumer would be willing to pay a higher price. The price will move upwards toward the equilibrium level. Floor price equal to the equilibrium price, it, the, it, it will leave the market unaffected. If floor price is more than the equilibrium price, it will need our attention. And at that time, a surplus will emerge. Surplus is situation is created. So, price support imposition of floor price above equilibrium price will have the following major implications. Surpluses. The quantity actually bought and supplied will shrink as a direct consequence of price support. As a result, large chunk of producers' stocks will remain unutilized. The situation as it arises has been where the surplus has been shown. Buffer stock. In order to maintain the support price, the government would have to design some such program as to enable producers to dispose of their surplus stocks. One such program can take the form of buffer stock. The government purchases the surplus stocks available with the producers. These stocks are released if and when the productive of the supported community suffers. The buffer stock operations benefit the producer as a group. Then subsidies. To offset the loss of consumers, the government may undertake to subsidize the product. By subsidy, we mean that the government purchases the product at the product support price and sells the product to consumers below its cost of procurement. The difference between cost and price is borne by the government. Then minimum wage legislation. Minimum wage legislation is similar to fixing of floor price. Governments at times interfere in the factor market also. Legislation may be enacted whereby in the market employers may be prohibited from paying less than the minimum wage fixed by the government. The effect of fixing the minimum wage would be the same as the fixing of the minimum price of the commodity. Then arbitrage. Arbitrage is an operation involving simultaneous purchase and sale of a commodity in two or more markets between which their price differential or dispensaries. The arbitrator aims to profit from the price differences. The effect of each action is to lessen or eliminate it. Then sharing of tax burden. When demand is perfectly elastic, the whole tax burden is borne by the producer himself. And when demand is perfectly inelastic, the whole tax burden is borne by the consumer because in this case the price rises by the full amount of tax addition. Then when supply is perfectly elastic, the whole tax burden is borne by the consumer. When supply is perfectly inelastic, the whole tax burden is borne by the seller as the pre-tax equilibrium position and post-tax equilibrium demands and change. So, here you discuss about the supply and demand, elasticity supply, and also the applications of demand. Now we come to the another chapter that is the consumer's behavior. Then what is utility? Utility is the basis of a consumer demand. The consumer demand a commodity because they desire or expect to derive utility from the commodity. The concept of the market interaction between consumer and producer has evolved in present times. So, utility is a psychological phenomenon. It is a feeling satisfaction, pleasure, or well-being experienced by the consumer from the consumption of the commodity. In this sense, it is a subjective concept. Level of utility derived from a product differ from person to person. Utility of a product can be absolute in the sense that the want satisfaction power is ingrained or embedded in it. So, utility not only varies from person to person, but also from time to time at different level of consumption and different modes of the consumption. So, then relation between want, utility, consumption, and satisfaction. Want of the consumer is the basis of understanding her behavior. A consumer selects a commodity based on its want satisfaction power. Consumption of the commodity leads to satisfaction of wants. Thus, want, utility, consumption, and satisfaction are related like that. Related in a manner. Want, selection of commodity, and then consumption of the commodity. Getting utility in the sense of satisfaction of the want. So, utility is a want satisfaction power of a commodity. Utility varies from person to person. It varies from time to time at different level of consumption and at different moods of the consumer. There are three concepts utility. Initial utility, total utility, marginal utility. The utility derived from the first unit of a community is called initial utility. The total utility, the utility derived by a person from the total number of units of a community consumed by her, is called total utility. Marginal utility, it means addition made to total utility by consuming an additional unit. It can be measured that marginal utility equal to total utility minus total utility of previous, just before of one utility. Then measurement of utility. The concept of measurement of utility has evolved over time. The classical economists Jimmy Bentham, Menger, Walras, and neoclassical economists like Marshall believed that utility is cardinally or quantitatively measurable, like height, weight, etc. So, this their belief is known as the cardinal utility approach. According to them, a person can express utility or satisfaction he derives from the goods in the quantitative cardinal terms. And the cardinal measurement of utility implies that a person can compare utility derived from goods in response of size. That is, how much one level of utility is greater than another. According to Marshall, marginal utility is actually measurable in terms of money, and money is the measuring rod of utility. But some economists, the modern economists J.R. Hicks, Allen, argue that utility is not quantitatively measurable but can be compared or ranked. This is known as ordinal concept of utility. Modern economists hold that utility, being a psychological phenomenon, cannot be measured quantitatively and theoretically and conceptually. However, a person can introspectively express whether a good or service provides more, less, or equal satisfaction when compared to one another. In this way, the measurement of utility is ordinal or qualitative based. Then, some basic assumption about preference. Economists define three basic steps to understand consumer behavior. Consumer preference. First, consumer preferences. First step is to identify consumer preference. This can be done graphically or algebraically also. Behavior is based on preference. Thus, it is important to identify what gives value to the consumer. Then, budget consideration. This is next important aspect. Price of goods and paying capacity of consumer has strong influence on his behavior. Through online tracking, companies today are not only able to identify consumer preference alone, but also their paying capacity and budget constraints. Then consumer choices. Final step to understand consumer behavior is consumer's choice. Given preferences and limited income, consumer chooses the combination of goods which maximize their satisfaction. With markets becoming global, consumers have large number of choices available these days. Then assumption about consumer preference. First, completeness. Preferences are assumed to be complete. Any two different bundle of goods can be compared. A consumer either prepare one basket over other or indifferent between two baskets. Then transitivity. Transitivity means that if a consumer prefers X over Y and Y over Z, then the consumer also prefers X over Z. Transitivity is a necessary assumption to ensure consumer consistency. More is always preferred over less. Consumer is rational and known that greater utility can be derived by consuming more quantity of a good of commodity. Thus, he always prefers more quantity of over less. Then cardinal utility analysis. Cardinal utility analysis is described by the Alfred Marshall. These approaches are some assumptions. The cardinal measurement of utility of any commodity can be measured in units. Utilities are additive. Utilities independent. Marginal utility of money remains constant. These are core assumptions of cardinal utility analysis. Then law of diminishing marginal utility, which is a very important tool of Marshallian utility or cardinal utility analysis. Law of diminishing marginal utility is one of the most fundamental law of utility analysis. It explains the relationship between utility and quantity of commodity. This law states that after sufficient quantity of a commodity is consumed, the utility derived from each successive unit decreases. Consumption of all other commodities remains same. After a point of time, when person is satisfied, we will not be able to eat more. The utility will drop to zero here. If the consumption of the commodity continued further, a person would get negative utility. This can be illustrated with the help of a diagram. In page 96, there is a diminished marginal utility schedule shown and the marginal utility curve is shown. It can be noted above the table and diagram that the utility of first unit is very high. The utility of second, third, fourth units falls and utility falls respectively. At the time of fifth commodities utility, after which it successively that starts giving negative utility. So the law of diminishing marginal utility is shown there. After some unit state, that time it is zero. Then it came to the negative utility. In exceptional case of the law of diminishing marginal utility, some small initial unit. The law is not applicable when the initial units of commodity are very small size. For example, drinking water with a spoon is very small initial unit, for which it is exceptional case. It is only after a stage in consumption in which that marginal utility begins to diminish. Then rare and curious things like rare paintings, gold and diamond jewelry, that law does not apply. Then criticism of the law. Law of diminishing marginal utility has been criticized by modern economists as measurement of utility is not possible because it is a cardinal approach, and where the number we know that utility is a psychological phenomenon, and thus it is not possible to measure it in quantitative manner. In real life, we can only describe utility for a product in words, not in cardinal. Then marginal utility of money does not remain constant. Cardinal economists believe that marginal utility of money remains constant throughout. However, when a person uses money, stock of money reduces, leading to increase the inutility remaining stock. Then utility is not always independent. Sometimes utility of one commodity is affected by other commodities. Many times consumer prefers to consume series of related goods. So, for example, a consumer may prefer to consume biscuits or pakoda along with tea. Unrealistic assumption. The law is based on various unrealistic assumptions. It assumes no change in fashion, taste, income, preference of a consumer. But in real life, environment is extremely dynamic, and so our taste, fashion, extra are changes. So, with new products having advanced features being launched so frequently, taste and preference of customers are also changing frequently. So, the Marshallian law of diminishing is criticized many ways by the modern economists. Then, consumer equilibrium through utility analysis. Consumer equilibrium is a situation where a consumer gets maximum satisfaction of his limited income and has no tendency to change in existing expenditure pattern. A consumer is considered to be extremely satisfied when he allocates his income in such a way that the last rupee spent on each commodity yields the same level of utility. It is described through a diagram. But before that, there is some assumption of consumer equilibrium. First, consumer is rational. Cardinal measurement of utility. It can be measured quantitatively terms. Marginal utility of money is constant. Fixed income and price. Price and income is fixed. Income of the consumer is fixed and prices of goods remain constant. Constants, taste and preferences. Then determination of consumer equilibrium. Suppose a consumer with fixed income consumes a single commodity. He will continue his consumption till a point where utility utility that he derived from consumption of a unit of commodity is greater than marginal utility of money spent on purchasing that unit. If the marginal utility of the commodity is greater than the marginal utility of money, then a consumer will exchange his money for a commodity. Consumer will keep on consuming and spending his money so long as where P price is of commodity and marginal utility of the money is constant. Thus a utility maximum consumer will be equilibrium. In this diagram, we saw that marginal utility and price are equilibrium at the quantity of OQX, and price is a PX. Consumer equilibrium in multi-commodity case. And this diagram can be explained through a single through a schedule. In the schedule, you see that table 5.3 unit of X, then next column is price of X, marginal utility, difference between marginal utility and price, then remarks. At the time of price of 10, the marginal utility is 18 and price is constant. Marginal utility is 10. First unit it is 18, the difference is 8. Second unit that is 16, difference is 6. Third unit 10, difference is 0. And fourth that is 8. The higher then it is showing downward. That is negative -2. And a point come where marginal utility is 0. That time the difference is -10. In the up to 4 point or up to 3 point, consumer will increase consumption. But when it is 0, the consumer equilibrium position is come and the marginal utility and price are equal. And then consumer will not buy any more units because marginal utility is less than the price. Then consumer equilibrium single commodity is unrealistic model in the sense that in real life, consumer consumes a large number of commodities. This model deals with the equilibrium in case of many commodities. This model works under the assumption of limited income of the consumer and, and diminishing marginal utility of commodities. Thus, utility maximizing consumer will first spend money on commodity which yield highest utility, then the second highest, and so on. Finally, a consumer will reach equilibrium when the last rupee is spent on different commodities will yield equal level of utility. This case of multi-commodity is known as law of equal marginal utility. A consumer having choices of multiple goods distribute their limited income in such a way that the last rupee spent on each commodity yields equal marginal utility. So, two commodity case can be generalized for multi-commodity case. Suppose a consumer customs various goods, he will be equilibrium when marginal utility of x by margin price of x by price of x equal to marginal utility of y by price of y equal to marginal utility of c equal by marginal price of c, like this way. Diagrammatically, equilibrium is achieved at a point when marginal utility of x equal by price of x equal to marginal utility of y by price of y. The law, this law with the help of an example. Suppose total money income of a consumer is 5, which he wants to spend on two goods, x and y. But both these commodity price at rupees 1 per unit. And the in the schedule consumer equivalent case of multiple commodity, we see that marginal utility which consumer derives from various units of the two commodities. It can be noted from the table that the consumer will spend first and second rupee on on commodity X, which will provide him utility of 12 and 10 utils. The third rupee will be spent on commodity Y to give utility of 9 units utils. Fourth and fifth rupee will be spent on X and Y respectively. To reach the equilibrium, consumers will purchase that combination of both the goods when marginal utility of last rupee spent on each commodity is same. Marginal utility falls as consumption increases. It happens when consumer buys 3 units of X and 2 units of Y because marginal utility from last rupee spent on commodity Y gives the same satisfaction of 8 utils as given by the last rupee spent on commodity X. Then marginal utility of each commodity falls as consumption increases. The total satisfaction of 47 utils will be obtained when consumer buys 3 units of X and 2 units of Y. It reflects the state of consumer's equilibrium. If the consumer spends his income in any other order, total satisfaction will be less than 47 utils. Then, derivation of demand curve with the help of law of diminishing marginal utility. Marshall assumed the utility function of different goods to be independent of each other. In other words, Marshallian technique of deriving demand curves for goods from their utility function rests on the hypothesis of additive utility function. Marshall derived the demand curve with the help of a law of diminishing marginal utility. The law of diminishing marginal utility states that as the consumer purchases more and more units of commodity utility that he derives from successive units goes on decreasing. A rational consumer, while purchasing a commodity, compares the price of the commodity which he has to pay with the utility he receives from it. So long as the marginal utility of a commodity is higher than its price, the consumer would demand more and more units of it till its marginal utility is equal to its price or the equilibrium condition is established. So, in figure 5.5, the marginal utility is negative slope. It shows that as the consumer acquires larger quantities of good X, its marginal utility diminishes. Consequently, at diminishing price, the quantity demanded of the good X increases. At X1, quantity of the marginal utility of a good is MU1. This is equal to P1 by definition. Thus, consumer demands OX1 quantity of the commodity at P1 price. In the same way, X2 quantity of the good is equal to P2, where at P2 price, the consumer will buy OX2 quantity of commodity. At X3 quantity, the marginal utility is MU3, which is equal to P3. At P3, the consumer will buy OX3 quantity and so on. It can be concluded that as the purchase of the units of the commodity X are increased, its marginal utility diminishes. So at diminishing prices, the quantity demanded of good X increases. The rationale supports the notion of down sloping demand curve, and that when price falls, other things remaining the same. The quantity demanded of a consumer increases and vice versa. Then, Marxist consumer surplus. The concept of consumer surplus was first formulated by Dupuit in 1844 to measure social benefits of public goods such as canals, bridges, national highways. Marshall further refined and played a significant role in providing in theoretical structure. Marshall's concept of consumer surplus was based on the cardinal measurability and interpersonal comparison of utility. According to him, consumer surplus is the difference between what one is willing to pay and what one actually pays to acquire a particular good. Concept of consumer surplus is a very important concept in economic theory, especially in theory of demand and welfare economics. It is also useful in formulation of economic policies such as taxation by the government. The, the concept of consumer surplus is derived from the law of diminishing marginal utility. As you purchase more units of a good, its marginal utility goes on diminishing. It is because of the diminishing marginal utility that consumers' willingness to pay for the additional units of a commodity declines as he has more units of the commodity. The measurement of consumer surplus from a commodity from the demand or marginal utility curve is graphically presented. In the figure, quantity of a commodity is measured along the x-axis and the marginal utility or willingness to pay and the price of the commodity are measured on the y-axis. D1 is the demand or marginal utility curve, which is sloping downward, indicating that as the demand buys more units of the commodity, marginal utility derived from the additional utility of commodity falls. If OP is the price that prevails in the market, then the consumer will be in equilibrium when he buys OM quantity of commodity. Since at OM units, marginal utility from a unit of the commodity is equal to the price OP. For OM units of the good, the consumer will be prepared to pay the sum equal to rupees ODSM. But given the price equal to OP, the consumer will actually pay the sum equal to the OPSM for OM units of good. It is thus clear that the consumer derives extra utility equals to ODSM minus OPSM, that is DPS. As a result, consumer surplus obtained by him from his purchase will decline. On the other hand, if price falls below OP, the consumer will be in equilibrium when he is purchasing more units of the commodity than OM. As a result of this, the consumer surplus will increase. Thus, given the marginal utility curve of the consumer, the higher the price, the smaller the consumer surplus, and the lower the price, the greater the consumer surplus. Then, criticism of cardinal utility analysis. Cardinal utility analysis of demand has been criticized by modern economists. Cardinal utility analysis of demand is based on the assumption that utility can be measured in absolute, objective, and quantitative terms, but in actual practice, utility cannot be measured in such a quantitative or cardinal terms, since utility is a psychological phenomenon and subjective feeling. It cannot be measured in quantitative terms. In reality, consumers are only able to compare the satisfaction derived from various goods or various combination of the goods. Wrong assumption of independent utilities. Cardinal utility analysis also assume that utility derived from various goods are independent. This means that the utility which a consumer derives from a good is the function of the quantity of that good only. In other words, the assumption of independent utilities implies that the utility which a consumer obtains from a good does not depend upon the quantity consumed of other goods. On this assumption, the total utility which a person gets from the whole collection of goods purchased by him can be calculated as sum of the separate utilities of various goods. Then, assumption of constant marginal utility of money, which is not true. An important assumption of cardinal utility analysis is that when a consumer spends varying amount on a good or various goods, when the price of good changes, marginal utility of money remains constant. But in actual practice, this is not correct. As a consumer spends his money income on the goods, money income left with him declines. Cardinal utility analysis ignores the changes in real income and its effect on demand for goods following the change in price of a good. Then, cardinal utility analysis does not split up the price effect into substitution effect and income effect. Another criticism of the cardinal utility analysis is that it does not distinguish between the income effect and the substitution effect of the price change. Marshall and other exponents of cardinal utility analysis ignore income effect of the price change by assuming the constancy of marginal utility of money. In real life, when the price of a good falls, the consumer becomes better off than before. That is, a fall in price of good brings about an increase in the real income of the consumer. With this income, he would be in position to purchase more of this good as well as other goods. This is the income effect of the fall in price, the quantity demanded of good. Then Marshall could not explain Giffen paradox by not visualizing the price effect as a combination of substitution and income effect and ignoring the income effect of the price change. Marshall could not explain the Giffen paradox. He treated it merely as an exception of this law of demand. In independent scar analysis has been able to explain satisfactorily the Giffen good case. According to independent scar analysis, in case of Giffen paradox or Giffen good, negative income effect of the price change is more powerful than substitution effect, so that when the price of a Giffen good falls, the negative income effect outweighs the substitution effect, with the result that quantity demanded of it falls. So, Marshall described the law of diminishing utility or the law of diminishing marginal utility with the help of cardinal measurement. This is a classical phenomenon. Then this one, the Marshallian theory was criticized by the Keynes Hicksian theory, which is otherwise known as the ordinal utility approach. J.R. Hicks and R.G.D. Allen in 1915, a new theory described that is ordinal utility approach. And this approach is also based on some assumption. First, rationality. The basic assumption is that consumer is a rational being. In Second, indifference curve analysis assumes that utility is only ordinarily expressible. Third, transitivity. Consumer choice are consumed to be transitivity. Transitivity of choice means that if a consumer prefers A to B and B to C, then he prefers A to C also. Then consistency. Consistency of choice means that if a person prefers A over B in one period, he or she will not prefer B over A in another period. Non-satiety. This assumption means that a consumer prefers a large quantity of all the goods over smaller quantity of the same. Then diminishing marginal rate of substitution. MRS is that rate at which a consumer is willing to substitute one commodity for another while maintaining the same utility or level of satisfaction to the consumer. Then indifference curve analysis. G.R. Hicks used the concept of indifference curve analyze consumer behavior. A consumer facing choice between large number of bundles of two goods tries to maximize his satisfaction by choosing a combination which gives him maximum utility. When all these combinations are plotted graphically, it produces a curve called indifference curve. Indifference schedule. An indifference schedule is a table which represents various combinations of two goods which yield equal satisfaction to consumer. Since all the combinations give equal level of satisfaction, consumer is indifferent between them. Here is a indifference schedule of two commodities X and Y. Combination are A, B, C, D, E, and units of X goods 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and units of Y good equal to 12, 8, 5, 3, 2, like that. Satisfaction is equal. When one unit of when consumer consume 1 unit of good X, then he take the 12 units of good Y. And in case of two goods, when he taken, he give up the 4 units of Y good and he takes 8. Like in case of three, when he take three goods, then that time of X, that time he takes 5 goods, 5 units of good Y. Like this way, when he take extra unit of good X, sometimes he give up some units of good Y. Then there is 5 different combinations are shown, and all the combinations are give him equal satisfaction. And the graphical presentation of indifference schedule is known as indifference curve. Then a graphical presentation table, indifference schedule of two commodity table, all the combination of good X and good Y, A, B, C, D, and E, which have equal level of satisfaction to the consumer. This curve is downward sloping, convex to the point of origin is drawn. So, indifference curve is sloping downward to the right and convex to the origin. Then indifference map. The combination of two commodities X and Y given in the indifference schedule are not the only possible combination for these commodities. The consumer may make any other combination with less of one or both of the goods, each yielding the same level of satisfaction, but less than the shown in schedule. IC curve of this schedule will be above IC1. Similarly, consumer may other combination with more of one or both of the goods, then each combination yielding the same satisfaction, but greater than the satisfaction indicator. So, a diagram is showing different indifference curve corresponding to different indifference schedules of the consumer is indifference map. In other words, a set or family of indifference curve is an indifference map. Then third is marginal rate of substitution. Marginal rate of substitution may be defined as the rate at which a consumer will exchange successive units of a commodity for another. In other words, marginal rate of substitution is the rate at which, in order to get the additional units of a commodity, the consumer is willing to sacrifice or give up to get one additional unit of another commodity. The marginal rate of substitution can symbolically MRS equal to delta Y by delta X. MRS is the marginal rate of substitution of X for Y. Delta Y equal to change in Y and delta X equal to change in X commodity. Diminishing marginal rate of substitution. Marginal rate of substitution decreases. It means that the quantity of a commodity that a consumer is willing to sacrifice for an additional unit of another commodity goes on decreasing. Law of diminishing marginal rate of substitution is an extensive form of the law of diminishing marginal utility. Law of diminishing marginality states that as a consumer increases the consumption of a good, its marginal utility goes on diminishing. Similarly, as a consumer gets more and more units of good X, he will willing to sacrifice less and less units of good Y for each extra unit of X. Thus, this significance of good X in terms of good Y goes on diminishing with each addition of good X. In the above table, we see that when units of good work X is, we consume 10 units, that time that is 0. Like that, units of good X is 1, consume, then units of good Y is equal 10. And as extra unit take 2, then he give up 3 units of good X and take 7. Like in 3 units of good X, that time units of Y good equal to 5. He give up 2 units. At less amount of the he give up from the units of good Y. Then the marginal rate of substitution of X for Y is 3:1. The rate of substitution is units of Y of 1 unit of X is substituted. As the consumer desires to have additional unit of X, he is willing to give away less and less units of Y. So that the marginal rate of substitution falls from 3:1 to 1:1. In the fourth combination. And when the consumer is willing to give up 3 units of Y to get an additional unit of X, hence MRS XY equal to 3. When this manner we put the points, we get the indifference curve and find that MRS is diminishing in nature. The marginal rate of substitution of X per Y is slopes of the curve at a point on the indifference curve, such as M, N, or P. Thus, MRS XY equal to delta Y by delta X. Today, we complete the assumption of the indifference curve and what is indifference curve, what is indifference schedule. And next class, we discuss about the properties of indifference curve and other things. Thank you.